The first time I saw the alien queen cry, it wasn't during a war briefing or a funeral procession. It was in the quiet between two heartbeats when she leaned close enough that her crown's shadow fell over my hands and she whispered, almost ashamed, "My daughter only wants you to be her father." For a moment, the galaxy stopped making sense, because you don't ask a stranger to become royalty. You ask them to become a weapon, or a symbol, or a sacrifice. But father, that word doesn't belong in a throne room made of obsidian and starlight. And yet, the queen said it like a confession that could shatter empires. One, the summons they didn't invite me to the palace. They extracted me. A diplomat's shuttle met my ship at the edge of the Lyra system, its hull marked with the silver crest of House Vale, three crescent moons wrapped around a single star. My crew watched in uneasy silence as the shuttle docked, its airlock opening with a sigh like something alive. Two royal sentinels stepped through. They were tall and narrow-shouldered, their armor woven from black metallic fibers that drank the light. Their faces were masked, but I could feel their eyes. A scanning beam crawled over me like a cold finger. "Elias Mar," one of them said. The translator in my ear made their voice smooth and genderless. "You will accompany us." I had heard the stories about the Vale, how their queens negotiated with smiles and ended wars with a sentence, how their laws were older than some suns, how their court could turn a compliment into a death warrant. I also knew why they wanted me. I wasn't famous. I wasn't rich. But I had done one stupid human thing in the middle of a battle, and it had apparently echoed all the way to the throne. 3 weeks earlier, a pirate flotilla ambushed a convoy near the Keening Belt. I was there because I fly relief missions, medical supplies, evac runs, boring work that only becomes interesting when someone decides you're easy prey. During the fight, our comms picked up a distress ping from a shattered escape pod. I saw it tumbling among the debris, its life sign faint and irregular. The smart move was to run. The human move was to turn my ship around. We pulled the pod in with grapplers. Inside, there was an alien child, blue-gray skin, a crown of delicate cartilage ridges, eyes too large for her face. She had a shard of metal embedded in her side. Her breath came in clicks and thin, painful whistles. I didn't know her species then. I didn't know her significance. I just knew she was terrified. So I held pressure on the wound with both hands, talked to her in a voice my mother used when storms hit the windows, and promised her she wasn't going to die alone in the dark. We kept her alive long enough to hand her over to the nearest neutral station. Then I went back to my work. And now the throne of House Vale wanted to see me. As the shuttle's interior lights dimmed and the palace world grew larger through the viewport, a planet wrapped in auroras like ribbons, my stomach tightened. My pulse felt loud. I had faced pirates. I had faced vacuum. But there's something uniquely terrifying about being summoned by a monarch who can rewrite your fate with a breath. 2. The Court of Moons. The palace sat on a plateau of basalt, its towers rising like blades. Bridges arched between spires. Waterfalls poured in slow, deliberate curtains, gravity manipulation, I realized. Even the water obeyed. They led me through halls that smelled faintly of mineral rain. Courtiers watched from balconies and shadowed alcoves, their eyes luminous, their expressions unreadable. Their clothes were art more than fabric, shifting in color as they moved. No one spoke aloud. But the silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. A door opened and I stepped into the throne chamber. The ceiling was a dome of glass showing space directly above us. The planet's ring system glittered like scattered ice. 3 moons hung in different phases, all of them pale and watchful. The light they cast turned everything into shades of silver, and there on the dais sat the queen. She wasn't monstrous. She wasn't delicate either. She was precise. Her posture was an angle of authority. Her crown was thin, almost fragile, like a filament of starlight that rested on her brow without touching her hair. Her eyes were dark, but they caught the moonlight in a way that made them look like deep water. Beside the dais stood a semicircle of advisors, priests, generals, and something else, people whose presence felt like knives hidden in sleeves. A herald spoke. Elias Mar, citizen of the Terran Coalition, pilot of the relief vessel Wayfarer's Hand. You stand before her radiance, Queen Sarath Vale. I bowed the best I could with a spine full of tension. Rise, the queen said. The translator rendered her voice as calm, but my brain heard the weight under it, the kind of control that comes from years of never being allowed to tremble. I rose. Her gaze held mine, not hostile, not kind, evaluating. You rescued a child, she said. Yes, your radiance. A child of my blood. My throat went dry. I didn't know. You did not flee. Her fingers moved slightly, a small gesture, and a hologram bloomed in the air, footage from my ship's external cameras. My vessel turning back toward the debris. The escape pod caught in grapplers. Me helmet off, hands stained with alien blood, speaking softly to someone the camera couldn't fully see. Around me, the court murmured like wind through reeds. The queen's eyes narrowed. Why? Because I couldn't not, because she was small. Because I remembered being scared and needing someone to tell me the universe wasn't cruel. But you don't say those things to a queen. Not in a court that eats weakness for entertainment, so I said the simplest truth. She was a person. Silence fell. Then unexpectedly the queen's mouth twitched, as if she almost smiled but stopped herself at the edge of it. You may approach, she said. My boots sounded too loud on the polished stone as I walked toward the dais. Every step felt like a decision. When I reached the base of the platform, she stood, not to loom over me, just to close the distance. She descended one step, then another, close enough that I could see a faint scar at the edge of her jawline, close enough to notice her hands were clasped tighter than they needed to be. And then she leaned in. Her voice dropped into a register the court would not hear. My daughter only wants you to be her father. 3. A request that isn't a request. I stared at her, certain my translator had malfunctioned. I started. She straightened her face, returning to the mask of royalty, but her eyes flickered with something raw. Aloud for the court, she said, You will meet Princess Lysa. The advisors shifted. A general's jaw tightened. A priest's frill lifted in disapproval, but no one challenged her, because you don't challenge Sarath Vale in public. They escorted me through a side corridor away from the throne room spotlight. The air felt warmer here, less performative. The walls were carved with reliefs of moons and storms and figures holding hands across a divide. At the end of the corridor was a door that didn't look like a prison, but somehow felt like one. A sentinel pressed a palm to the frame. The door slid open without a sound. Inside, the room was childlike in an alien way. Soft lighting, floating sculptures that drifted lazily in a field of controlled gravity. A low table with puzzles made of interlocking crystal shapes. And on the floor, kneeling with her back to us, was a girl. Not a child exactly. Maybe 14 in human years, though species differences made it hard to guess. Her ridges were smaller than most adults I'd seen in the palace. Her limbs were long but still slightly awkward, like she hadn't finished growing into herself. She was holding a broken drone in her hands, the pieces spread out in a careful circle. The queen spoke gently now. "Lysa." The girl's shoulders stiffened. She didn't turn. The queen's voice softened further. "He is here." Slowly, as if risking pain, Lysa turned. Her eyes met mine, and stars help me, she looked exactly like the child from the escape pod. Older, yes, but the same wide eyes, the same slight asymmetry in the ridges above her brow. She stood hesitant and took one step forward, then another. Her gaze never left my face. "You came back," she said, translator catching the shape of the words as something fragile. "I did," I said. She swallowed. Her hands trembled, and I realized she was fighting not to show it. "I told her," Lysa said, flicking her eyes briefly toward the queen, "that I didn't want another tutor. I didn't want another guard. I didn't want another contract." The last word landed like it tasted bitter. The queen's throat moved. She didn't speak. Lysa stepped closer until she was only a meter away. She lifted her hand, stopping just short of touching my sleeve as if unsure she was allowed. "In the dark," she whispered, "you spoke like you meant it." I felt something in my chest pull tight. "What did I say?" I asked softly. Her voice shook. "You said, 'I'm here, I'm not leaving, you're safe with me.'" I remembered. I remembered saying it because it was the only thing I could give her in that moment. I also remembered thinking I'd never see her again. Lysa's eyes glistened. "No one says things like that here," she said. "They say what is correct, what is expected, what is useful." She took a breath, then said it straight, like a blade laid on a table. "I want you to be my father." The queen's whisper returned to me like an echo. "My daughter only wants you to be her father." I looked at Sarath Vale, expecting to see cold calculation. Instead, I saw fear. Not fear of me, fear of what her daughter was asking the Empire to become. "For the price of a word, I'm not," I began, then stopped. "Princess, I'm not your blood, I'm not your people. I don't even know your customs." Lysa flinched, but she didn't look away. "I know," she said. "That is why." The queen exhaled slowly. "Elias," she said, using my name without title for the first time. "My daughter's father is dead." The air changed. Even the sentinels in the doorway seemed to still. "He was killed," the queen continued, voice steady, "by a faction within my own court who believed compassion was weakness." I tasted anger, sharp and metallic. "They failed to kill me," she said, "but they succeeded in taking him." And in the years after, my daughter learned a lesson from everyone around her. Her gaze cut toward the hall beyond the door. "That love is a liability, that softness is punished." Lysa's chin lifted. "But then you came back," she said to me, "for a stranger." Her eyes narrowed with an intensity that felt too old for her face. "You returned into danger for someone you did not owe. That is not weakness. That is strength with no audience." The words struck harder than they should have. I had never thought of it like that. The queen stepped closer, lowering her voice. "In our law there is an ancient right. A foreign guardian may be bound to the royal line not as mate but as anchor." "Anchor," I repeated. "A stabilizing bond," she said. "A promise witnessed by the moons. It does not make you king, it makes you family." Family, the simplest word, the heaviest. I looked at Lysa. She was holding her breath like the universe depended on my next sentence. I thought of my own father, rough hands, quiet presence, the way he fixed things without announcing he was doing it. The way he showed love like a sturdy beam in a house, invisible until it's gone. I thought of the escape pod, the child's eyes, the way she'd listen like my voice was a rope. And I thought of the court waiting outside this room, hungry for weakness, eager to turn this bond into scandal or leverage. "This isn't safe," I said. Lysa's voice came out small. "I know." The queen's face tightened. Nothing in my palace is safe. That is why I must choose carefully what I am willing to protect. She looked at me like a monarch and a mother at once. I am asking you, she said, to be what this empire has tried to erase. 5. The tests they didn't let me decide in peace. If the queen had announced I'd be made a general, the court would have cheered. If she had announced a marriage alliance, the nobles would have negotiated for concessions. But a father, that didn't fit their boxes, so they tested me. First came the priests, draped in shimmering veils, who asked me to recite vows in a language I didn't speak. When I couldn't, they tried to call it disrespect. Lysa stepped forward and translated the spirit of the vow instead of the words. "He will not lie to me," she said. "He will not use me." Then came the generals, who led me to a training ring and handed me a blade that hummed with contained energy. "Protect her," one of them said, and released a drone swarm without warning. I wasn't a warrior. I was a pilot. So I did what humans do when we can't outfight something. I improvised. I grabbed a training shield, knocked over a rack of metal poles, and used them to short the drone's sensors. I moved my body between Lysa and the swarm, not elegantly, not heroically, but stubbornly. When one drone clipped my shoulder, pain flashed white. Lysa screamed my name, and something in me shifted, not because I wanted glory, because I didn't want her to learn the same lesson she'd learned before, that people leave. The last test was quiet. A counselor led me into a room full of hollow recordings, images of Lysa's father, his voice, his laughter, his hands weaving a small charm out of moon thread. The counselor watched my face carefully, like they expected jealousy or greed. Instead, I felt grief. For a man I never met, whose absence had carved a hollow in a child. For a queen who carried that hollow like a weapon wound. The counselor spoke softly. "If you accept, you will stand in his shadow." I looked at the recording of the man's smile and said the only honest thing. "Then I'll honor it, not replace it." The counselor blinked, thrown off script. When I returned to Lysa's rooms that night, she was sitting on the floor, rebuilding her broken drone. She looked up as I entered, eyes searching. "They tried to make you go away," she said. "They'll keep trying," I replied. She nodded as if she'd expected that. Then, tentative, she slid a small piece of crystal across the floor toward me. It was a puzzle piece, the kind meant to connect with others. "In our games," she said, voice quiet, "you don't give someone a piece unless you want them to keep building with you." I sat down across from her, picked up the crystal, and fitted it into the structure she'd been making. It clicked into place. Lysa let out a breath she'd been holding for years. 6. The fracture in the throne, the court moved from testing to plotting. Whispers followed me like smoke. Servants avoided my eyes. A noble's laughter cut off when I walked past. One evening, the queen summoned me to a balcony overlooking the ring-lit ocean. The wind carried salt and electricity. Her guards stood far enough away to pretend we had privacy. She didn't look at me at first. "They will try to take her from you," she said. "They?" I asked, though I already knew. "The faction that killed my consort," she said. "They failed to break my rule, so they adapted. They learned to weaponize legality." Her fingers gripped the balcony railing. "If they can prove you unworthy, they can demand the right be nullified." "And if it is?" I asked. The queen's voice turned brittle. "Then my daughter will learn finally that hope is a lie." I hated how much that sounded like something I'd heard on human battlefields. "We won't let them," I said. She turned her gaze to me, and for the first time her control slipped. "You speak with certainty," she said quietly. "Do you understand what you are promising?" "I understand what she's asking," I replied. The queen's eyes flicked up to the moons. In my youth, she said, I believed empires were held by fear. Then I married a man who held them by kindness. Her mouth tightened. They killed him for it. Silence stretched between us. Then she said, softer, my daughter believes you can do what he did. I swallowed. I'm not him. I know, she said. That is why I fear you may succeed. 7. The night of knives. The attempt came 2 days before the rite. It wasn't dramatic at first. A servant delivered a tray of food to Lysa's rooms, sweet fruit, steaming broth, a cup of shimmering tea. Lysa stared at the cup, her ridges lifting slightly. This smells wrong, she said. My heart dropped. Don't drink that. The servant's hands trembled. It is what the kitchen sent. I moved fast, knocking the cup away. The liquid splashed onto the floor, hissing as it ate into the stone. Poison. The servant backed away, eyes wide with terror. I was told it was calming. Lysa's voice went sharp. Leave. The servant fled. I grabbed Lysa's shoulders gently. Are you okay? She nodded, but her eyes were too bright. They want me silent, she whispered. Not dead, silent, so I stop asking. My jaw clenched. You don't stop asking. Footsteps thundered in the corridor. Sentinels appeared, weapons drawn, and behind them, an advisor from the throne room, face smooth as polished stone. Elias Mar, the advisor said, you have interfered with royal provisions. You are under suspicion. I stepped in front of Lysa without thinking. Back off. The advisor's smile was a slice. You are a foreigner. You have no right to. I have every right, Lysa said, and her voice carried the kind of authority that startled even her guards. He is my chosen anchor. The advisor's eyes narrowed. The right has not occurred. Lysa lifted her chin. Then you are admitting you fear it. For a moment the corridor held its breath. Then the advisor laughed softly. Very well, princess, let the moons judge. He turned and walked away. Lysa's shoulders sagged. She looked suddenly younger. I crouched to her level. Hey, I said softer, look at me. She did. You were brave, I told her. And you were right. Her voice trembled. What if they win? I didn't have a warrior's certainty. I didn't have a queen's strategy, but I had something else. I took a slow breath, the kind my father taught me to take when engines misbehaved mid-flight. Then we make them lose in a way they can't undo, I said. We make this bond real before they can rewrite it. 8. The right beneath the moons. The right wasn't held in the throne room. It was held outside, on an ancient platform carved into the plateau's edge, where the 3 moons could witness without walls. The court gathered in layered silks and armor. Priests held bowls of luminous dust. Sentinels formed a ring around the platform. The queen stood tall, crown bright against the night. Lysa stood beside her, hands clasped, eyes fixed on me as if I were the last stable object in a shifting universe. I stepped forward. A priest spoke the old words, translated into my ear in fragments. Bond, anchor, promise, witness. Then the queen approached me with a small blade. It wasn't for blood, I realized. It was for symbolism. She cut a thin strip of fabric from my sleeve, my own clothing, my own world, and laid it in Lysa's hands. Then she took a strip from Lysa's ceremonial wrap and placed it in mine. Hold, the priest instructed. I held the alien fabric. It felt like woven moonlight. The priest poured luminous dust into the air and it drifted around us, catching the starlight in slow, floating spirals. Speak, the priest said. My throat tightened. Every eye was on me, hungry, skeptical, waiting for me to fail. I looked at Lysa. Her eyes were wide, vulnerable, trusting, so I spoke not to the court but to the girl. I can't change what you lost, I said. I can't replace him, but I can be here. A murmur rippled. I continued, louder now, letting the words become a spine. I will not use you for power. I will not turn you into a symbol I can cash in. If you want me in your life, I'll show up on the days you're strong and the days you're afraid. I swallowed, feeling the weight of the next line. And if this palace tries to teach you that love is weakness, then I will be your proof that it is. The dust swirled. The moons hung overhead like silent judges. Lysa's lower lip trembled. She lifted her hands, the strip of my fabric held like an offering. I accept, she whispered, then firmer, I accept you. The platform's engraved runes ignited with soft light. A shock of quiet moved through the crowd. Some looked angry, some looked shaken. The queen closed her eyes for a moment like she'd been holding her breath since her consort died. When she opened them, her gaze was sharp enough to cut through centuries. Let any who oppose this bond speak, she said. No one did, not because they agreed, because the moons had lit the stone, and in veiled tradition that meant the universe had already chosen. 9. What a father does in the weeks that followed, the palace changed in small, stubborn ways. Servants began meeting my eyes. A guard offered Lysa a smile. A counselor stopped speaking to her like she was a political object and started speaking like she was a person. The faction didn't vanish, of course. Poison doesn't evaporate, it hides. But it hesitated now, because something unpredictable had entered the equation. A bond not built on treaties. A relationship not made for leverage. One afternoon, I found Lysa in the palace's outer garden, where gravity was softened so plants could grow in spirals. She was sitting beneath a tree whose leaves shimmered like thin glass. She looked up as I approached. For the first time, she smiled without flinching afterward, as if waiting for punishment. I did something today, she said. What? I asked, sitting beside her. I disagreed with a minister, she said, eyes bright. In public, my eyebrows lifted. That's bold. She nodded, then hesitated. I was afraid, but then I thought. She looked at me, cheeks coloring in a way that reminded me heartbreakingly of human kids. I thought, fathers stand behind you when you speak. My throat tightened. I stared up at the 3 moons, pale against the day sky. I'm behind you, I said quietly. Lysa's shoulders relaxed like she'd been carrying weight she didn't realize could be set down. After a moment, she leaned her head against my arm, careful, as if testing whether the world would allow it. It did. Across the garden, the queen watched from a balcony. She didn't smile, but she didn't look afraid anymore either. She looked tired and relieved, like someone who had finally found a way to keep the part of herself the empire tried to kill. Outro empires are usually rebuilt with weapons, but sometimes they're rebuilt with something rarer, something no one can easily counterfeit. A promise kept when no one is watching, a hand held in the dark, and one simple word that terrifies tyrants more than any fleet ever could: Father.